Well, I'm here to talk to you a little bit about how to make your content work harder and not just do more of it. The content treadmill is real. You're generating content for so many different platforms. If you're creating fresh content for all of these, it feels like you'll never keep up. You've got everything from your blogs to the collateral to your social media, your websites, what they now refer to as pillars is what your SEO wants. Whether you're creating speeches, preparing for trade shows, running your advertising, it seems like it never ends. Wow. Wow. If you're wishing you'd be over there, thank God, it's okay. So to repurpose your content, the first thing I want you to do is just start with what you have. Gather it all together. Find your photo archives. I'm a huge fan of put everything in paper. Create visual contact sheets, thumbnail sheets, put them in binders, copies of all the collateral you have, go back through the archives. Newsletters from 20 years ago can be a source for content. I like to keep spreadsheets of all of the content that I created, so I can go back through and remember, did I write about that in September? How long ago did I talk about it? Take inventory, gather it all in one place. Come on in. We're just getting started. After you've got everything gathered, assess what your analytics say about all of it. By that I mean get into your web analytics, find out who's consuming your content. Google talked to you this morning a little bit. If you're not real up on how to use your analytics, come on in, Jay, to learn who your, to learn who your audience demographics are. Get in there and see what information. It's an amazing resource. It can tell you age groups. It can tell you when they're looking at your website. It can tell you what pages they're looking at, how long they're spending on it. You can do the same kind of analytic data dive into your social media. The Facebook Insights is an incredible resource. Figure out how your audience is consuming your content right now. Talk to the folks in the sales team. How are they using the collateral? Excuse me. What do they use it for? How do they get it in people's hands? Learn as much about all of your content as you can. Then review where you're not. Your analytics will tell you where you are and what people are doing with it, what they seem to be reacting to. But your head's going to have to tell you where you're not. And the way you're going to dig into that is to start to work through what's called your consumer's journey or your buyer's journey. How many of you are familiar with that term? Okay, maybe half. So a buyer's journey is the path that someone takes as they come from an uninterested party all the way through to a buyer for you. They're going to start at the completely unaware and they're going to become aware. What process they go through to do that. Maybe they're seeing your ads. They got in touch with collateral. Maybe they heard it word of mouth. They move from aware into interested. At that point, you have to start to kind of educate them. They start to compare you to competitors. They dig into that process a little bit more. At that point, they may be ready for a trial or a demo. They actually start to test it. Then you move them into sale. You don't get to close the sale from the very first ad. Nobody pops the question on the first date. Well, I hope they don't. And you shouldn't do the same either. So as you're looking at all of your collateral, do you have what you need to feed that whole funnel? And are there gaps? If you know your consumer starts to become aware of your product through word of mouth, are you helping people tell your story? Do you have a loyalty program? Are you putting the kind of content out there on Facebook that's shareable, that help people share your story that way? If you know that part of your process for moving people through the funnel is to provide them with a demo, your sales team are telling you, once they demo the product, we've got them. We almost never lose them. Then it's really important that you're feeding content to get them into that demo stage. Do you have what you need to get them at that point? Are you giving product comparisons? Are you comparing yourselves to the competition? So where are you and where do you need to be? Now that you've got that, do a little research, what really worked. And by this I mean not just what made the sale, but what seems memorable, what seems to be touching the heart of your reader. Do they love video? Are they long-form fans? Will they read an entire 5,000-word blog or not? Are they short form all the way? A lot of this is going to have to do with your understanding of who you're talking to, which was what we tried to do in the very beginning when we took inventory. You have to know who's consuming your content and what they want from you. Is your audience moms of small children? Then they may be consuming your content while they're standing in line. They may be reading your social media feed before they fall asleep at night. And if that's the case, you better make sure your video have captions, because they probably turned the sound off so they're not waking up their partner. So it's a matter of looking at what you've done, what's really working. And then finally, it's that buyer's journey piece. What are those gaps that you need to fill? If you've done this homework, now you can really look at the content you have and know how to repurpose it with purpose. Make sense? This exercise will give you the framework you need to know what of your old stuff is gold and can live 30 different lives, and what of it you need to shove way back in the file and pretend no one ever did. So now that we've got all that, we're actually going to start repurposing some content. The first thing we're going to look at are changing the words. When people get into repurposing content, that's the thing they always think about. It's a whole lot more than that. There are a lot more opportunities for you than just repurposing content with words. I'm just using the title of this talk, and we're going to do it 1,000 different ways. Okay, well, not 1,000. We're going to do it a lot of different ways so you can see what you can do. Title of the talk, this is us. If you meant to be next door. Yeah. All I've done is write new headlines. It starts to feel like maybe it was a different talk. Maybe you haven't heard that talk yet. In fact, the talk is titled, Haven't I Seen This Before? Change the words they see first. Sometimes that's the subject line of an email. You can actually resend the exact same email to people who didn't open it before and only change the subject line. Or the subject line in the pre-header, which is the little bit that copy that shows in your, yeah, you all know. Change your intro, change the titles, change a subhead, change how it reads. So now you can take that same long form blog that you created and bust it up. Turn it into a bulleted list, turn it into bulleted copy, create short nuggets of information. Same blog, you're just going to rejigger it a little bit. Add in subheads if you didn't have subheads. Or take that same blog and add just a little content in order to make it valuable to your audience in a different way. This is a way to take content you have and now make it appeal to a different audience segment in a little different way. So an example that I will use is we work with a very technical manufacturing company, and I will get product case study information from the engineers that nobody wants to read except the other engineers. And it's great for the other engineers. We can put that into a white paper and the engineers geek out over it. But if I take that same report and now I put a case study in it of a product example from a customer's perspective, now I've got the same geek out technical information, but I've added customer perspective. Or I can take the same corporate brochure and I can now add testimonials. Or I can add quotes or breakouts. It's a little more content. It's not strictly repurposing, but at least you're not doing the thinking. And as we all know, one of the biggest problems with repurposing is just figuring out what are you going to talk about. So if you're starting from something you already have, you're halfway there. The next, take that same content and put it in a different format. So this is different than just breaking it up into a numbered list or a bulleted list, but actually treat it differently. I've never taken the engineer's report and put it to song, but I could. Might help. Actually, they might really have fun with that. But you get the idea. Give it a completely different spin. I actually took the title and I turned it into a haiku. I actually think I like it better than the title I gave this one. Infographic, something like that. That's where taking that engineer's thing, turning it into something that I can actually put on a pop-up stand on stage or at the trade show booth. Now I've got something that is really visual, very, very short, and in fact, I can take pieces of this and turn them into social media posts. Once you've taken that long form copy and started to chunk it up, now you've got 30 different pieces. And you can finally switch the tone or the style. Again, now this is that engineer's report that's got a very geeky tone to it. If I'm going to sell that to moms, it's great information on this new breast pump and why it's going to work, but mom is not reading that engineer's report. I have got to change the tone. But I need both because both audiences are important to my client. So on one hand, I've gotten very silly, and on the other hand, I've taken that content and I'm turning it into an 8-week course. Same content. Just changing up the words. Slicing and dicing. But we can also use our visuals. Leave the words completely alone. Now we've got the exact same words we had originally, and we're just going to start to change how they look. So we're using different photos and different layout. This is especially important for those really visual content purposes you have. Social media is huge. Any short form writing that you have, trade show graphics, posters, conference room graphics on the corporate level. They're very, very visually driven. It's still the same copy content. You can work with illustration. Doesn't have to just be photos. And typography is your friend. If you're not comfortable working with these pieces, and granted, once you really start getting into the subtleties of design, bring in a graphic designer who really know how to rock this for you and make it work hard. Because it can. The right graphics done well will do a lot of work for you so that your words don't have to work as hard. You can see the one on the left has more of a techie feel, and the one on the right a little more sophisticated. Maybe it's for the academic group. Take your content and turn them into charts and graphs and visual stories. Meet them where they are. Your content and your reader, you've got to get copy and visuals that tell the story they need told at the time they need it, when they need it. Remember our original homework, knowing what of these you need to do depends on what gaps you're trying to fill. And create some fresh visuals by making it move. In our firm, we've found that through the analytics, invariably, movement captures better than still. Whether it's animation, whether it's video, whether it's a GIF, whether it's long form or it's short, if it moves, it's stickier. If you're creating content from the beginning, or if you're putting a fair amount of work into repurposing something that was old enough that you've got some updating, it's important to start to think about how to do it right the first time. If you plan ahead, it's so much easier to repurpose later. And if you get stuck, these are about 18 different places to look for content ideas. Any of those you've never heard of and have questions about? I don't want to just read the screen, that's so boring. But it mostly involves getting off of your desk, getting out into the interwebs, doing some research, and most of all, talking to people. And ultimately, your reader, to find out what is interesting them. So as part of this process, I've developed a set of forms. I've got a few of them up here. I'm happy to share with you all, or leave me your business card and I'll email them to you. But as an example, let's work through this process with a couple examples of content we're going to repurpose. Fair enough? Let's try it together. Let's say, for instance, you have a 12-minute corporate video. It's long, and it's a little dry. It's got a shots of the corporate headquarters. It's actually got a kind of a nice piece where they hired the drone to go up over it. Cuts to the president, lots of talking head, explaining the mission, vision, values. The idea was the piece was going to be used for new employees when they came in. It was going to be part of that welcome first onboarding day. And it's good for that. And it was, frankly, it was kind of a lot of money to make. And now you've got this. What can we do with it? Just as a still? Or cut it? Or cut it into a short? Absolutely. What could we do to that to make sure that it works a little harder to fill a gap? How might your audience get more out of it? Maybe there's extra. Go ahead.
Well, anytime that you do any of those videos, it's very easy to go in and edit them to whatever you're trying to get across on it. So if it's a 12-minute video, you probably have 4 or 5 30-second ones that you can
Chunks that you can pull out, absolutely. And one of the keys for that, what I was trying to get at that, is change your captioning. Add graphics, visuals over it. You can adjust the messaging as to what point you want to leave in somebody's mind. The drone shot, maybe the captioning changes. Our new 30,000 square foot facilities, you know, it's got something about that. Or the greenest building in Greene County, you know, whatever your caption, whatever your point is that you want to make, work that in there as well. Yes, lots of little pieces. 90 seconds is a fine short video, but as short as 6 seconds is valuable. They're called bumpers, and that's short enough that YouTube, you get it in before they skip the ad. So if you can make 6-second shorts and get a message in there, you've actually got something that's not skippable, and that's important. You have to think about those differently when it comes to repurposing your content. If they're that short, it's like joke, punchline. That's about all you've got time for. It's a ba-dump, bump. Okay. So maybe there's bloopers from the corporate video. Maybe there's a funny, cute shot you can do something with. Or maybe there's a shot of the president delivering one of those value pieces. Maybe it's a super short piece and a message. It's like, we believe in our people, now hiring. Okay, 6 seconds, we got a recruiting piece, check. We can also take that video and convert it from the transcript. You know, you can pull transcripts off of a YouTube. Every YouTube video, transcript's right there. You just go up under the more, click on it. I'm a yoga fan. It's hilarious to see the transcripting of yoga. The Sanskrit is like, and now we get into the robot dog something, so it's like, they can. But they're a great resource and not having to go through and retype. You can get the actual words that were said, turn them into quote cards. Little teeny pieces, run those on social. Pull out the audio only, turn it into a podcast. Or maybe there's actual audio that's interesting enough, it can be part of the on-hold message. Take content from it and plug it into the corporate brochure. Maybe there's stills. Maybe you take quotes from the video of the president speaking and stills headshots off of the video, and those go into corporate piece. Maybe they actually become a short piece that loops that you run at the trade show booth. Or they turn into the infographic because that one quote was really good. And that just goes on a banner stand. We take a chunk of it, because in 12 minutes there's a lot of content there, and we're going to turn it into a blog. We may have to write a little intro. If the video was actually created as part of our HR onboarding, maybe somehow we talk about how much we love our employees, and I've got a feeling there's a natural connection in there. There's probably an onboarding blog in there. In fact, there also might really be good copy for the careers page of the website. In fact, a chunk of that video might be really nice sitting on that webpage. Got some of the different thinking we're doing from it?
Do you have a program or something you can use to make infographics and the charts and graphs?
Nothing that you can just plug them in. That's really where working with a graphic designer is something that can help you with that, translating that into a visual story for you. Yeah.
You can use Canva, but it's not going to be as visual as using it.
Right, right. If you're not, have you ever heard of Canva? Mm-hmm. It's a great program for just creating those little quote cards, those sorts of social media graphics, single image pieces. Valuable resource. And I encourage you, if you know you want to create some sort of an infographic, Google Images is a great resource to just see what other people have done so that you can look at it and think, I think we could plug this statistic into this kind of I like this one somebody else did, and at least provide some direction to your designer if that's important to you. Give you something you're trying to copy. So that's a corporate video that we're going to repurpose. Let's take a blog, because we've all had to create them. Let's say you're in healthcare and your blog is about vitamin supplements for new mothers. What are we going to do with it? What could we do? I'm going to say it's a 500-word blog, and it's currently on the website written for an audience of other health practitioners. And you're the supplement company.
There. Your blog post that talks about the best vitamins for them to use, and then singularly break it out each one by one in a post on social media.
Perfect, yes. Now you've got one piece, you've done it 5 times. Can we do something different for all the different social media? Because I don't want you just posting the exact same content to Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn. How can we repurpose that content 3 ways?
You need to think about how each of those are read. Twitter is going to be more text, or your photo on it, short keyword on it, and your link to your blog or whatever. Your LinkedIn is a more professional end. So again, think about how you can change your text words and then whatever you can to get them to go to the blog. But
right.
Consider the content of the social media
right.
you're using in order to get across.
Right.
You may have all those words and everything inside that blog. You just may have to reword it a little bit based on the
Sure.
platform.
Right. You're hitting upon something really important, not only thinking about how the platform tends to be used, but I also want you to think about how your people are using that particular one. So if you know your LinkedIn are other health professionals, okay, but if you know your LinkedIn is actually future employees looking for HR opportunities. That may spin that differently as well. Twitter, Facebook, same kinds of stories. But we could do that same situation. So we've got the 5 supplements posts, and we're going to spin that for Twitter. One of the main differences, of course, is the length of the post. So shortening that up, go ahead.
You could do 5 days of 5 supplements. So
Absolutely.
Each
Each,
day you have one.
right,
highlighted.
right. Absolutely. Would be kind of fun to, so we're taking Twitter, say for instance our policies, we're posting 3 times a day on Twitter. We even break that down a little bit further. So now we can take each of those, because we're at a very short form, and break those into 3 chunks, where the 1 a day for Facebook may be a little bit longer piece.
Different photos for different types of products that you might.
Yes, that's a fun way to do it as well. Simply changing up the visuals that go with each of the posts. Could be the exact same content, but you've used icons and very simple graphic imagery for Twitter and a more photo-based version for Facebook, for instance. Looks very different content. The other thing that you can do between those two is simply switch your content around. So if you've got 3 sentences that make up the post, the Twitter actually takes the last sentence and puts it at the front. You don't have to completely recreate to repurpose it enough to make it look fresh. It goes back to that very original words thing, just change what they see first. I'm really feeling boring. I am so sorry, guys. Laugh louder. Awesome. All right. Let's wrap up with some thoughts about some pitfalls. Can you or should you outsource your content creation? Maybe. That's a really definite maybe. It's going to depend on the technical expertise that your subject requires and whether or not you have access to somebody that you feel understands the reader for that kind of content. And sometimes that's more important than it is that they're a subject matter expert. If you're trying to reach 17-year-olds, you may need a 17-year-old to write your content. They don't have to know how those supplements were created, but they have to be able to be related to the other 17-year-olds. Understand the difference between advertising and marketing or communicating. I don't want you selling all the time. It comes to that same concept of the funnel. People begin to understand you. They're at a very awareness stage. It's very light. We're all friends. This is a cocktail party. We're just moving between conversations. It's short form. It's easily consumable. It's got a strong entertainment quality to it when it's at that top edge of the funnel. As you move down the funnel and they get more serious about being a customer, you can get into the nitty-gritty more, but you can't be there at the very beginning, at least not all the time. And then finally, make sure you're on brand. And this one's tough, especially when you're trying to hit those 40 different content platform opportunities that you have all at the same time, and or very difficult when you have a lot of different market segments. If you're trying to sell to a 17-year-old and a 30-year-old and a 70-year-old, and you're still trying to fill all those blogs and the social and all those platforms, it's crazy pants. But you still have to understand what the corporate voice is and the corporate brand look. so that as you're trying to repurpose, you don't lose who you are. Questions? We've got about 7 minutes. Yes?
You spoke about how there's multiple channels, blogs, and you're trying to do all these things at once. Do you have advice for either organizing it, planning it, or creating the content?
Yes and yes. Get yourself a calendar and figure out,
What type?
it's
Physical.
physical too. Spreadsheet. Honestly, I just create spreadsheets for it. It really depends how many platforms you're trying to do and your particular audience and where they need to be. If you've got an audience that expects you to be tweeting 5 times a day, you need a different kind of calendar than one that you tweet once a week and you don't really care if you're even there. So that's why I use a spreadsheet. I can put however many lines I need. I'll run date down the left-hand side, platforms across the top, and I just start plugging in content. And that way I can see, I'm running that in Twitter that week, but I'm actually going to pick that up 3 weeks later and run it down here on Facebook. And that's I can checkerboard content. Go ahead.
So plugging and chugging is easy, but the creative part is the difficult part. So how do you plan what content you're creating? Because plugging in is like the
Right. It's easy to go back. It's easy to repurpose when you've already had it. So that's where this list becomes useful. The list of all the places you can go to figure out what can I write about. Look for, if you've got a website that's got a search function, find out what people are searching for. Write to that. You can provide added information for your market outside of your own product mix. If I use, my young mother's example, and you're selling supplements, well, they're going to be as interested in other health issues as they are just your supplements. And so that's where that beware of marketing or advertising all the time versus providing some valuable marketing communication. Sometimes you can come in with other information. Check your chat box. Check Google Trends, especially when you're looking for that adjunct information within an industry. That's a nice place to try to figure out what else maybe you should talk about. If you go into your AdWords, check your keyword search, keyword finders, to see what else people are looking at in your industry and write on those kinds of topics. When you create your archive and you go back and you try to figure out, oh my gosh, 20 years ago, sometimes history from a company is another great thing you can plug and chunk with and spin up into a new story. So if you've got the 25th anniversary book of the company, you're now in year 35, it's 10-year-old information, but there's still some valuable stories in there. You may be able to pull one of those out and update it. It's not so long ago that you couldn't go back to those people and ask for a perspective 10 years later, or give it a little spin as in light of today, or throw it in just as it is as a throwback Thursday. Does that help? Great.
Can I share a resource?
Absolutely.
I use a program called CoSchedule. So that has a feature on it where you can plan out your social media campaigns, but it also has this feature called Evergreen where you can mark posts that it will recycle for you, and it keeps track of when it does it, so it's not like recycling the same post every week. So that's a nice way that if you're like, I'm kind of in a bind for what to say next, it can pull out some of those things that you've already said that are still relevant, a month, 2 months, 3 months down the line.
So it just strictly reposts. It doesn't change any of the words for you or any
It
of that?
doesn't. So
Okay.
you do have to watch what you say and how often you do it, but
Sure.
it's better than going 3 weeks without having anything up.
Right,
So,
right. Yes, and tell us the name again?
CoSchedule.
CoSchedule. Great. Perfect, thank you.
I do genealogy, so my blog is I go to the newspapers and find like a grandparent's anniversary, and then I tell how that story can
Yes,
give you a lot of other different information on your family.
yes,
Or I wrote about the first black guy who ran for president in Iowa.
cool.
Now, I'm not selling anything there. Am I being too subtle?
No,
Okay. Just a second.
don't sell all the time.
No,
You're
like,
fine.
I do the same thing, that type all the time. So
Absolutely.
I'm not selling.
But do you hear what she's doing when she does that? She's establishing herself as an expert. And that's so important. Because obviously you know, or you wouldn't be able to write this. And that's everything.
Thank you.
So
I didn't
yeah,
realize I was doing that.
absolutely. No, that's fabulous. So in the journey funnel, if we took that kind of an article, where would we plug that in? Is that top level when somebody's just curious and interested? Is it further down? When would somebody want to consume that kind of content? Top. Yeah. It's probably top, though it's pretty long form, so it does kind of float down a little bit. So one thing you might consider doing is creating some short form versions of that you could use in places where short form's more appropriate, like social media. Whether it's just a short introduction to the blog, have you seen my blog this month on blah, blah, or tidbits, pieces, infographics that you've created based on that blog.
They don't actually share the blog, just share the
You
note.
can link to the blog
Okay.
off of the social. They're giving me the 2 minutes heads up. So we've got time for one more question. Go ahead.
I always tell clients, you're boring. Don't talk about yourself all the time
Right,
and go off the beaten path
right, exactly.
because you're actually going after trying to get new people to come onto your site, so you need to be creative with it.
Right,
And
right. What I always say to people is you need to be relevant to them. So it's not just that you're boring, it's that they're more interesting. And so you need to be interesting to them and figuring out what that is. That's part of that whole original homework that I wanted you to do. Looking at your analytics, figuring out who your audience is. And then be unique enough that they remember you. That's always a dance. That's a whole nother talk.